A 10-day trip to Asia. Joining me now is Naveed Jamali. He is a former FBI double agent and also author of How to Catch a Russian Spy. Naveed, with a big welcome to you. Let's get right to some of your time. I know you were at the Office of Naval Intelligence during some of the other flare-ups with North Korea. Give me your take on the missile launch today.
Well, I think the big thing, Alex, is that, in fact, North Korea decided not to test a nuclear weapon. To me, that tells me that China was able to rein things in. So even though the missile, demonstration, if you will, was a failure, the fact that they kind of de-escalated, I think, is a major signal. And, look, at the end of the day, Alex, it's really important that the U.S. really kind of backs down from this concept of, parroting regime change or a unified peninsula. These are things that tend to ratchet up the sort of rhetoric in North Korea. So I think that's really an important step there.
So you're giving China a lot of the credit there. Do you think any of the credit goes to the Trump administration for what they did in Syria, what they did in Afghanistan, dropping the mother of all bombs there? Do you think that also sent a message?
Well, I'm not so sure about that. I have to say, as someone who, kind of came up through 9/11 and saw what happened in Iraq and saw us deposing Saddam, I think that there was a big lesson to be learned in the military here, but there's also a big lesson to be learned by other countries, including North Korea, including rogue states. Look, dictators don't, retire to Boca, and I think that they look at this and they want to stay in power. So the big thing here, and when we looked at Syria, the fact that we're attacking Syria proper and the Assad regime is a clear signaling that the Trump administration is willing to, go after rogue states. And I think that concerns North Korea. At the end of the day, North Korea does not want to get into a war with South Korea, Japan, and let alone us. What they want to do is negotiate. And the way that they negotiate is, unfortunately, by doing this. The priority has to be, as General McMaster said, to denuclearize North Korea, but not for regime change.
So, Naveed, what do we know about Kim Jong-un besides the obvious? I mean, how much do you think he's willing to risk? What do we know about his mentality?
At the end of the day, I think that these are people that are very good at theatrics. I don't think Kim Jong-un is willing to, this might sound odd, but in a lot of ways, he is a rational actor. He's predictable. He's not really willing, and look, they have done some pretty aggressive acts, to include sinking a South Korean corvette. I mean, they're willing to take some sort of conventional kinetic action, but they're not willing to go to all-out war. And that's as long as we don't humiliate them. And I think, Trump tweeting and making claims that insinuate regime change are things they're going to take very seriously. So if we back down that rhetoric, I think we will see them back down that rhetoric as well.
Is he different, though, than what we learned about his father and his grandfather? I remember the era with Kim Jong-il, and he was someone that he caused a lot of fear and concern in the United States.
Yeah, yes, he did. And look, obviously the tenor has changed now as he's developed his nuclear program, specifically with, the potential of an ICBM that could reach, the West Coast. At the end of the day, though, I think that he realizes, like his predecessors, that to escalate to a kinetic, overt act as that would really be the end of him. And at the end of the day, Alex, these people, regardless of which generation we're looking at, are into self-preservation. They want to continue on. That is their greatest goal. So as long as we cater to that a little bit, we, ensure our security.
Is there a way to gauge how he is viewed by the people of North Korea? I mean, can we know? You would think that if anybody were to come out and kind of vociferously oppose him, they're gone, they disappear.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. And look, there's a, part of the economy is propped up by this sort of black market that goes on in North Korea, and there's a huge, the Chinese are very, very careful to not let North Koreans cross the border easily. So, obviously, and what he's put his people through, I mean, just the camps that he has where he imprisons, not just, if you speak out against the dear leader, you're not just imprisoned, it's like 3 generations of your family that are put in prison. So a horrible, brutal dictator. But clearly, on the other hand, he has the sort of unwavering, if you will, support of the people. So I'm not so sure that we're going to see democracy, sort of swell up organically in North Korea anytime soon.
Is there a way to gauge how close North Korea is to launching a successful strike at, say, Guam or Hawaii or Alaska?
I've heard a lot of experts talk about, the rockets and ICBMs, and I would defer to them. But I would say this, that when you look at what is his motivation, what would his motivation to do that be? I mean, clearly, if he was able to launch one or maybe two of these potentially low-yield weapons, even if they're not nuclear armed, what would be the reaction of Japan, of China, of the United States? I don't know what he would be getting out of that. So, no, I think that even though he may be developing the capability, his development of it is put in the context of ensuring his regime. He wants to make sure, look, this is almost like a mini Cold War. It has to be sort of this we have to sort of isolate North Korea, which we've done. I don't think that there's any intent to strike first unless he believes that his regime is going to fall either way. That is something that perhaps he may do a first strike, but otherwise, really, what would be the intent to do so? I mean, he would have to know that he would suffer, tremendous repercussions, and most likely, that would be the regime change.
Yeah, well, let's hope logic prevails. Former FBI double agent Naveen Jamali, thank you so much.